But I guess we'll get started today. So thank you everyone for coming. This is going to be our fourth ever career talk. And I'm super excited because, these series of career talks have evolved over the last couple of months. It's been really nice to see you all come and engage every time we have new different faces. And so that's awesome as well. Please excuse me, my dog is a little activated at the moment. You can go to the next slide, Guy. Okay, so basically what we'll do today is we'll get into some welcome and introductions, and then we will open it up with a conversation with our guest, Dr. Jowanna Malone, and then we'll end it out with announcements. And so, like I said before, I think folks came on, while we do this, please don't feel like you need to hold anything in until the very end and continue to engage in the chat as necessary and as you would like to. Okay, I'm gonna pause for a second while my dog slows down for a bit. But Shai, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Shai Sealot. I'm a project associate here at the network, and I primarily work here on Cancer Leaders Like Us and our other project N2S. And yeah, it's really great to be here. I'll pass it back to Jayla.
Yes, everyone probably knows me. I'm the one that's sending all of the emails all of the time. Jayla Burton, she, her pronouns. I'm the project manager for the Cancer Leaders Like Us program, and I'm located in Oakland, California. And then we have our special guest. I'll allow you to come off and say hello if you'd like.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jowanna Malone. Yeah, I'm happy to be here, research scientist from Whitman Walker Health. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to talking soon.
Cool. Thanks. Okay, next slide. Awesome. So I'm not sure, I know, like I said, there's a few familiar folks here, a few new folks. I always like to go over a few housekeeping things before we dive in. But we are, well, Cancer Leaders Like Us is a program that is through the National LGBTQ Cancer Network. And so I wanted to give you all a little bit of an overview about what we do as a network outside and beyond this program, so that you all can kind of get a sense of, kind of our role as an organization and some of our priorities. So the network works to improve the lives of people living with cancer that identifies LGBTQ+, in three different ways: through education, through advocacy, and through training. So like Shai mentioned, they work on N2S. We do a lot of policy things. We do a lot of sorry, there's dogs walking by and he's just going off. So give grace in this moment. But yeah, so we do a lot of patient and provider education as well. If you want to go to the next slide, Shai. So what is Cancer Leaders Like Us? Cancer Leaders Like Us is a relatively new program. We started Clue back in October when we had our first networking event. And since then, we've done a myriad of different things. For example, we've done career talks, which you guys are all at today. We do different skill building activities, networking opportunities, internships. We just launched a student advisory committee that's going to be active during the summer. And so what we really aim to do is provide professional development and a space for folks to make connection that are LGBTQ and or BIPOC, emerging leaders interested in health. And what we really would like to do is get folks interested in some of the possibilities that cancer work holds, because I know a lot of that work is a little bit nuanced, and so we want to kind of shed light on those opportunities and how to get there. And then you could go to the next slide. Okay, I think the next slide is you could stop sharing. And so without further ado, in order to kind of have this moment of networking, opportunity sharing, or just experience sharing, I would say. That is why Jowanna is here to speak with us. I got the opportunity to meet her at the GLAMA conference, which I actually don't even know what the acronym for GLAMA stands for, but it was based in San Francisco. I want to say back in maybe November. So I was like maybe 1 month in on the job. And I think that was also around the time that she was also starting the role that she's in now. So I'm so happy that that has evolved to me like bringing you into this kind of network to share your experience. So yeah, I guess my first question for you is, can you tell us a little bit about your journey to and about your journey and how your identities shaped and formed some of the experiences that you've had up to this point?
For sure. Yeah, and I agree too. It's been nice to have the opportunity to come here from that encounter back at the conference. But so I'm Jowanna, like I had said before, and I guess my whole journey in terms of the work that I am doing now started back in college. So I went to Harvard College, and then right after that went to the School of Public Health and focused on epi. I actually had started off being like a classics concentrator, like I was really into like Latin and all of that before going into public health, but I switched to sociology because of just I kind of had this moment of just kind of where like all my identities and like what I actually cared about came to a head then. So I guess to save like, for me personally, so I'm a cisgender heterosexual Black woman. And I mean, I feel like growing up, I'm from Georgia, I'm from rural Georgia, and, had many experiences from that of just dealing with racism, sexism, all those things, and then coming into a place like Harvard and things from like a rural space. And so I was this huge Latin nerd before, going into college, but then it was just like, the department I was in, like no one really cared about the same things of like, I felt like what was so pressing today. And so I felt like all the things I like to nerd out on at that point in time, I like focused all of those energies into figuring out like, okay, well, why, when it comes to people's identities, like they could likely die for whatever reason, like despite whatever they would do for their own personal health. And so that at least sparked the whole like looking into like race relations and health and things like in college. But in terms of the focus on HIV in particular, I mean, it wasn't even, it was kind of like where the opportunities were kind of opening up at that time. And so I had fell into looking into the Harvard Center for AIDS Research, the Harvard CFAR. They had these internships in the summer. And it was a pretty kind of casual means of like getting into the internship. Like they had this person who was the head of the community programming, and the whole internship was us just meeting all these different people in Boston who were doing things at HIV. So doctors, peer health navigators, people in like policy, all different kinds of people, church leaders, all different kinds of people. And so from then on, I just kind of fell in love with like the whole community as it related to HIV research. Like it's very, very interdisciplinary in a way that I just haven't really seen in other kinds of fields, kind of from the outside looking in at least, because we were meeting people who, who had addiction, issues themselves, like who used to be homeless, but now they're out and, helping other people, like teaching children and talking about their own experiences. And all of that was related to HIV and like addressing the epidemic. And so going into, and Jayla and I had like these conversations before, kind of leading up to this meeting about thinking about identities and like why, I'm doing what I'm doing. I just felt like it just seemed so apparent when it came to HIV, at least in the US, people who had so many different marginal identities, whether it was, okay, being Black. And then on top of that, if you were a sexual minority of any kind, if you were a gender minority of any kind, or if you're already struggling with other like, things that people just struggle with in general, substance use, whatever, that just made you even more vulnerable to HIV. And especially like there were so many things, like a lot of great developments in HIV at that point in time, that unless you're really thinking about the intersectionality and like how so many things can stack up to make you so much more vulnerable, then like people don't really think about HIV even now today when it comes to the US, if you're not kind of in this whole world, because it's like something where, oh, people are living a long time. And if that's true, that's great. I mean, you know, biologically and medically, it's been amazing. But once you do pay attention to, like, say for like when it comes to Black women, you know, there are similar rates to other like sub-Saharan African countries and things like that, you know, but people wouldn't necessarily think about that unless you're thinking about how this stacks up. And then let alone when it comes to trans women of color or any type of group that has, again, these like multiple identities that are stacked up against them. So it's been kind of this huge rabbit hole since then. I feel like the rest is kind of history from then on, like in college, like doing that internship and meeting all these different kinds of people, and then knowing, you know, but it's what I've all experienced personally, my family being from the South, other health ailments, you know what I mean, that just makes people in the US, the Black community in the US so much more vulnerable to so many different things. It just seemed like a natural call to action, I felt back then. So yeah, that's what started this whole thing off.
Yeah. And it seems like a snowball that has just like been rolling down the hill and building up into this like great work. I have another question when you were talking about kind of the community aspect of, you know, the research topic that you've kind of been focused on for the majority of your career. What, like, I guess, what has been one of the most challenging parts of being a researcher and also trying to like integrate and do things from a community centric perspective that you've experienced?
For sure. I feel like I could talk about that all day. I think the main thing, especially when you're talking about like community oriented research, it was something that I felt like I had to supplement a lot in my training. So I mentioned before, I went to the School of Public Health at Harvard, and then after that, I went to Hopkins for my PhD. And people who know in terms of Baltimore, so I'm in Baltimore, but the Women Walker Health where I'm at, that's in DC. You know, there's a lot of history there when it comes to like Hopkins, and then like the over like surrounding Baltimore community, a lot of mistrust. Same with Harvard too, you know, if you're coming from a place like these kinds of places, or you're in a research capacity period, that there's a huge layer of mistrust that you have to kind of get through. That is what I've noticed. I mean, it's even holding whatever identities that I have, I feel like when it comes to this whole work, you know, I think there's an assumption that like, oh, well, if you look like the community, or if you identify in the same ways, that there's like an opening there. And like, it's not like that's not the case to some degree, but regardless of the case, I'm still someone coming, you know, I'm a researcher, I'm still a PI from some other place. And there's definitely been this whole trope of people from research coming into communities and then getting whatever they need to get, whatever data they need to get. And it's not something that benefits the community that they're benefiting off of. You publish papers off of the data, you apply for grants based off of that data, maybe, and then you can get more money and do that, and so on and so forth. And so, you know, for years, like these are tensions that like they're not really new, you know, and even as of late, as of now, like we recently, a colleague and we put in a supplement to do a community-based participatory research kind of project where we're connecting with people in Ward 7 and 8, hopefully try to create some type of research agenda, and you know, you have to connect with different partners and things, and it's all about forming these relationships that you're not really taught or trained to form, you know. And the structure of research, like how it's operated, it's really hard for people who are at the PI level. Like once you get to this level of like, if you do get a PhD or you start can put in your own grants, you're actually at this space that you're pretty distant from the community. And so people who are out here who've been, and it's been years, like people have been doing this work, but it's still the same issue where it's hard to build those relationships if there's no trust there. So it's like you first have to build that trust first, and then try to have a project where you're actually authentically, including people in every stage of the process. And it's just not structured for that to happen all the time, and people get rightfully annoyed with that. So yeah, it's been interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I appreciate you for naming the kind of the work that comes with holding maybe partial identities of some of the work that we're doing, and how it's not to be assumed that that automatically like makes you a member of whatever community it is that you are, like, researching or trying to work with or provide programs for. Like, I think that's often an assumption, that is, yeah, I don't know, that is at the grand scheme of things with throughout all, like, a lot of different projects, like not only research. So thank you so much, for naming that. I'm curious to know, so with your work at Whitman Walker, I know they also focus on policy and education. I think there are three things: are research, policy, and education. And so how does your work kind of pair with those other two priorities? And do you like work collaboratively with folks that are at the organization? And what does that look like? Because I feel like sometimes people see research and they're like, that shouldn't really be the end step, but it's hard to envision and imagine like what some of those other implementations might look like more tangibly.
For sure, yeah. So yeah, with Women Walker, it's been an interesting time because the research aspect has been not new. I mean, they've been doing research, but in terms of it being an institute, so they started an institute about like 3 or 4 years ago. But in terms of the policy and education, that's been there, at least in some, for instance, like with legal services and things like that, closer to when the clinic was formed. And so it's been cool to see how it's been gelling out now. Like for instance, like now we have this uplift study that is in collaboration with the policy department. So there's a policy analyst who's coordinating all these different connections from across the country with like these different investigators. And we're trying to come up with these metrics to measure like structural racism and how that's impacting like the well-being of people who are like really vulnerable to HIV, but also to other ailments and things like that. And so, I mean, these are kinds of things that at least in grad school and like college and things, like I feel like people, if you wanted to create a study or if you had all this money in the world to make, like it always seemed like it was impossible to do. But because we have these different departments and we have these different analysts who work in research and education and policy, like now we have this big study where we have people in all of those different places working together to make these metrics. And now we're going to hopefully, be publishing based off of that and things like that. So it's been really cool to see that done very well, because I don't think I've been at a place that has purposely done that well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really hard to do. But yeah, I wanted to go back to, when you had answered the previous question, you were saying that when you were building community with like the groups that you were doing research with, like that was supplemental. And so like, could you speak a little bit more to some of the support that you kind of sought out on your own, and where you found that support, and like what your experience was like during that process?
Yeah. So when I was doing the master's, I did this internship at the Boston Public Health Commission, and it was a racial justice internship. So we were basically just helping. They had this consortium within the Boston Public Health Commission that was responsible for training all of the staff on like racial justice and the history of Boston and like things like that. And I had gotten involved with that so I used to work at Fenway Health, or they're in Boston. It's a similar I would say organization as Women Walker in terms of being like an LGBTQ community health focused center and doing a lot of like HIV related research. So from that time, doing research there, I had met a lot of people who were doing a lot of like racial justice work, because again, like being within, you know, these certain spaces when it comes to like intersectional work, you know what I mean? Like there's still issues of racism or sexism or anything when it comes to, you know, different spaces and like being cognizant of that and like and identities and everything like that. So after I was at Fenway Health and I was doing the master's, I knew that they had this internship and I did that, and that was just great of just kind of providing that supplemental training, like this hands-on training where you can kind of see in a public health department type of space like how a lot of these things don't really work out very nicely, as opposed to like kind of just being in this ivory tower of sorts and like reading about things, researching them, or like being in school. And so same thing too with once I did the PhD, there was this HIV testing and counseling ban. The first year I was here that I volunteered on the side and loved doing that, because again, it was about just kind of like being out in the community, like sitting out, offering people condoms and things, talking to people about services and things like that. And so I feel like in each juncture, also, but there's a Ryan White Planning Council as well. People who aren't familiar with Ryan White, it's funding that HRSA sends to certain health clinics to help people who are living with HIV who can't afford certain services. So it's been a big help with, you know, if you can't afford HIV medication. So serving on that council back in Boston as well, like half the people who are on the council are people who are living with HIV themselves, or at least people who are like providers in some capacity, whether it be community or clinical or what have you. So I think, I mean, that's been like the bedrock of what's driven all my research questions and the things that I've been interested in doing. Because again, in terms of like just relying on classes and things and tests in that realm, like just to get these degrees, you know, I haven't really learned like the best practices of how to plan actual, just tangible things when it comes to solving the public health issues that we're studying about. So you learn, you know, you get trained very well, at least when it comes to the methods of studying these things and like thinking about them and being creative. Which is why I wanted to continue and get a PhD and do all of that and have like the leverage to do the research that I want to do. But it's been nice to have those other experiences, because now I feel like, okay, I'm in a position where I can really have the power to integrate these things into whatever grants that I want to do or the studies that I want to do. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. And then I'm curious, do you have like a personal mentor at all? Okay, and then how did you go about like acquiring a mentor? I feel like I didn't get a mentor until I was well into my like professional like journey, and it would have been really helpful for me to have something like I don't know, not something, but someone that was kind of there aligned and like kind of knew what I wanted to do and would advocate for me and stuff like that. So yeah, how did you go about like finding a mentor and things like that?
For sure. I feel like I have several mentors over the years, but the person, I guess, because there was one person that came to mind. But so in college, my advisor for my after I switched from classics to sociology, he became my advisor. So David Williams, he's at the Harvard School of Public Health, and I do credit like how I look at the world of like disparities and inequities on him and his teaching. He taught this class, Race, Poverty, and Health, an undergrad. And after that class, I was like, could you please be my advisor? And he's like, sure, whatever. And my project was on like the Black church and how that impacts the health behaviors in the Black community. And then ever since then, of course, I feel like I've had that lens of just, again, like identities, how is that like manifesting into, different inequities? Because this whole class, where it would be like racial, sexual, economical, like he broke down, this is what the data is saying when it comes to X, Y, and Z of like, Black women having, low birth weights and things like that, even if they have like prenatal health care access and they're like the most educated compared to, their white counterparts who maybe they even like smoked during pregnancy or something like that, but they still had worse outcomes. Like things like he would expose us to data like that, from other places, not just from Harvard. And he's always just from then on, like my research interest has definitely kind of divulged a bit of like focusing on like sexual minorities, HIV specifically, and things like that. And he does very much like more broadly like health disparities. But throughout like ever since my undergrad up until when I went to the School of Public Health, I was in the epi department, but he was in social behavioral sciences. I still went to him, talked to him about where I wanted to go. He knew I didn't want to do, and I'm still, funny about like being in academia, perpetually. Like ever since then, I was like, I want to do this, I want to do a PhD and all that, but I don't want to be, in academia. And he would encourage, he would encourage in a way like where it wasn't pressuring. Like we had like a sat down conversation and he would just tell me all the kind of like the benefits of being in academia. And we'll just kind of leave it at that, but he, even when it came to like me deciding different programs, because I could have stayed, at Harvard for the PhD, and he was very much happy for me to like do whatever I wanted to do and go wherever, the people that were there that was doing what I wanted. Like it was obvious that that was like the priority for him. And that kind of has dictated like how I've picked mentors from then on, because I feel like in every place that I've been at, I feel like I've picked out, a mentor. And like my advisor at Hopkins was Chris Beyer and Lori Dean. Lori, like in particular, I still keep up with her now. She's also a Black woman and is like an associate professor at Hopkins. Very similar kind of, relationship where it's like, whatever I want to like, what I want to do, what my goals are, it's very much about that and not necessarily about, what the particular advisor, wants. Because I will say, I feel like, and a lot of people can relate to this who are in academia now, when it comes to say like picking an advisor or picking, any type of mentor, there's a difference between like having someone who, mentors you in a way where like they lead you into like what you want to do, as opposed to say if people like they have their own things that they want to do, and then, maybe they're whatever you want to do isn't aligned with what they want to do, you know what I mean? And so it's like, it's really important to pick people who will kind of remind you of like what you want to do, what you're able to do, and encourage you in that way. And so, yeah.
Yeah, because it could have been very easy for your first like mentor to like steer you into academia because that's like what his like where he saw a lot of value like in the work. So, but I really think it's interesting how you mentioned that you kind of had to go out of your designated program to seek like sometimes our mentors, the people we look up to, they're not going to be in the College of Epidemiology. They might be like working for, I remember I was obsessed with this professor that worked in the College of Women and Gender Studies, and I was studying physical therapy. And it was this like, it was such an active effort to, we ended up being like, now I would say we're friends now, like more than like mentor mentee relationship, but like nurturing those relationships kind of really does help add to like what it is that you want to do and help refine like what it is that you want to do. So, and then with that, I guess my next question for you is you did mention kind of the traditional route of like once you get a PhD is to kind of stay in academia, and that you're not sure, and I hope it's okay to talk about this because it's like you're not sure if that's like right for you, which I think is a great thing to even be able to name. So can you kind of walk us through like what you kind of envision for yourself, like long term, with the position that you hold now and like all of the knowledge that you've obtained up to this point?
For sure, yes. I feel like where I'm at right now is just perfect for me because of the fact that, I mean, I feel like I'm cheating a little bit because I feel like I'm doing all the things that academics need to do, like I am trying to apply for grants, I'm trying to publish papers, like, I'm being a scientist and all of that, but because of how things are structured, like I'm at an institute that's at a clinic that has this particular mission, that's very, aligned with all the things that I've been so interested in. Whereas, of course, if you're at a school, which of course there's people can argue like there's even more of like free reign there because there's so many types of different people, so many different departments and things like that. But I mean, the whole trajectory of what's expected of like an academic, of like worrying about achieving tenure and doing all this and that and the third, I just, if it happens, like if I just, happen upon that type of position later on, then sure. But, I just wasn't really interested in like having that be my focus after I did my PhD. And with the PhD, like, because we talked about this before about like just your why of doing something like that. Like, so for me, it was just to have the leverage of being able to do the things that I wanted to do. So that could be at, an industry, that could be at a company with that level of expertise, because at least what it brings you, ideally in the thing that you really want and that you care about, that you kind of have a say in it. Like you really thought about whatever this area of research is, and now you have your own way of thinking about it, your own questions that you've been meaning to ask the whole time that you've been learning about it. And you can really do that anywhere. You don't necessarily have to be at a school, or you don't necessarily have to be in academia at all. And I've always just been really attracted to just this whole realm of research and things. So yeah, I've been just like a research person for this whole time. And in terms of like academia and industry and this and that, I mean, it depends on, if the factors align. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And then I guess I'll close out with one more question. And then if folks have questions, please feel free. You can take this moment to put them in the chat, or there'll be a later time if you would like to come off camera and ask as well. But if you had any advice for like your younger self in terms of like, your academic pursuits and journey, like what would that be? What would that one bit of advice be?
Oh, that's a deep
It's probably a
question.
hard question.
I
I'm like, I think this is a good question to wrap up with. It's like probably one of the most layered ones, but
Wow. I would just say to keep going and to keep doing you. I feel like honestly, this has been one of the only realms of my life. Now, if this was to talk about other areas, like Lord knows, I probably wouldn't be invited to speak. But when it comes to, I guess, like this particular area, I feel like I've always been so rewarded with just following my heart. And I've done some scary things of like just switching my major in the middle of college, halfway through, I was taking classes with like freshmen and sophomores, and I was like later on into that. But, even I was at this consulting job before and then switched to this particular position and things. And so I feel like I would just tell myself just to keep going, and like you'll be rewarded for following like your heart and whatever you want to learn, and just to keep learning with like what you want to learn, what you're interested in.
So thank you so much. That was a great answer.
Cool.
Cool. Okay, so I will stop asking questions and open it up to anyone else. Does anyone else have any questions? And then Shai, you could start sharing slides again. Thank you. Okay, Marina asked a question, and I will read it off just in case Marina's not in the place to come off camera and speak. But the question is, what does your day-to-day responsibility, what do your day-to-day responsibilities look like as a research scientist at Whitman Walker?
There's I guess not really like a day-to-day, routine. But it depends on like the season of what's happening. So like recently over the last couple of weeks, my day-to-day was focusing on this DCCFAR supplement that me and a colleague were applying for, and it was like this quick turnaround, and we were emailing out people in Ward 7 and 8 that like lead these different organizations and like trying to get letters of support. Like, so that was just kind of day-to-day coordinating, like, okay, finishing this grant. Other times, if we want to be focusing on publishing papers, then it's trying to organize people to do that, and like, okay, what part of this paper analysis do I want to do? And then other times it's kind of like looking at opportunities. So like looking at grants that I want to apply for in the future, and trying to kind of like making a game plan for that. So it's just been mostly kind of overall just doing research in different different parts of the process of like trying to make a budget for your future grant, or trying to finish this application, or trying to do this analysis for this paper, writing a paper and things like that. So it's been a mixed bag.
And then I'm going to follow up to that question, because I know there's so many different steps and people involved in research. So like I assume that there's like you work with other people that like do like data collection and data analysis and things like that. Could you talk about some of the other roles that you've probably also held and probably still do? I feel like PIs do probably everything, have to have their hands in a lot of different things. But can you talk about those other different moving pieces as well?
Yes. First of all, I love that, because I feel like, yes, coming from where you've had to do that and do all your own analyses, it's so great to have a whole data team that can do your analyses for you, or even you can have whatever kind of ownership you want from that. So if I need help with, okay, I just need you to just do this data set and I'll do, this or what have you. So yeah, it's been depending on like whatever data analyst has been working with whichever data set, you can just email and be like, hey, it's been, and again, like being in this level, it's different than being in some of the other levels of like being, research assistant and then being a student, where I can just go on Teams and ask like Scott, hey, can you look at X, Y, and Z data? I want to submit an abstract somewhere and look at this, so it's pretty seamless in that regard.
Mhm. And then I'm guessing you work on a lot of different projects at once, right? Like you're not just researching one thing at a time, I assume.
Yeah, so that's something too that, I mean, as of now, I'm still like, based off of a lot of some of the projects are in different stages. So, if something's like more ongoing and I'm like the site PI for that, it's just kind of looking at the maintenance of that, of like how is the budget looking for that, and communicating with like admin people. So again, about communicating with different parts of the research process. So like there are things that like research admin are responsible for that like I don't have to worry about, but then I still need to be aware of as a PI of the study and things like that. So kind of like knowing where all those different studies are at, and like the stages will depend on the priority of the day, essentially. And so that's been something I'm still trying to like have a perfect system of managing.
Thanks. I also took over again with my question. So if anyone has any others, please let us know. Um, going once, going twice, going 3 times. Okay. All right. You could go to the next slide, Shai. Well, I wanted to say thank you so much for like coming on and sharing like about your experience and kind of the journey to where you got to where you are. It's so interesting hearing everyone like on these series of career talks talk about like how it is that they got to where they are and what it is that they're doing, because things really look different. Like, I don't know, the field of health is so different. Like, it's such a melting pot and alphabet soup of things. And the way, and depending on what topics we're working on, all of our work looks a lot different. So thank you so much for sharing your experience. Again, if folks have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. If not, no worries. I hope that it was like really fruitful to you all as well. Just to go in, we're going to close out soon, but just before we say goodbye, just a few announcements. If you want to go to the next slide, Shai. If you are a student or know any students, we do have our spring paper and poster contest. I sound like a broken record when I say this, but we don't want you all to recreate anything. Like, we are asking that you submit something that you already have to work on for like coursework, for capstone, for field work, whatever that may be. If it has anything to do with like health disparities, health equity, in any type of field, it doesn't have to be cancer specific at all. We want to see it. We want to honor you all for doing that amazing work. And the prize, there's 2 cash prizes available for undergrad and graduate students. So submissions are due at on May 31st at 11 by midnight, kind of like a school assignment. But all it requires you to do is like send us what you're working on. It's very simple, very easy. We try to make it easy for you all. And if you want to go to the next slide. And then the only last thing is we're really short on announcements for this meeting, which is great. But if you haven't filled out a participant profile, please do. We are going to be working over the summer to kind of set up some more tailored resources for the folks that are involved in CLUE. So if you would like if you're interested in having a mentor potentially, or looking for an internship of any type, or wanting to do research and need access to different data sets, whatever that may be, we don't know that unless you tell us that. And we don't know that unless you ask. So I would say fill out this participant profile. It gives us like a better sense of what it is that you all need. And then last slide, drum roll please. And if you need anything, please do not hesitate to ask. Like, I'm always available to have coffee chats with folks if you would like to, whatever that may be. I would love to make myself available to you all. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. But I think that wraps it up. We ended a little early, so I'll gift everyone back 15 minutes. But thank you all for coming, and we will see you at the next one.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay.